right, let's just set a scene. I want you to picture this. It is 03:24 in the morning, pitch black. You're in Baghdad, right outside the international airport.
And on the road, there's this small convoy, just 2 vehicles moving away from the terminal. Looks completely normal.
Totally routine. Minimal escort, low profile, trying not to be seen. But what you can't see is what's overhead.
Right. Almost silent, circling in the dark, is an MQ-9 Reaper drone. And its operators aren't just watching, they are waiting.
Waiting for the final word. Because this isn't some routine patrol. This is the final step in executing a signed order.
And we're not talking about a battlefield commander's order. This came from the Oval Office.
Exactly. And then, in a flash, the vehicles are just gone, vaporized. The man inside, Qasem Soleimani, is dead. Now, we all remember that headline.
Oh, yeah. The news, the burning wreckage, the famous ring they used to identify him.
Right. But for this deep dive, we want to look at something different. We're looking at what happened after the explosion.
Specifically, that incredibly tense 48-hour window right after the strike. Because the source material we've been digging through, intel reports, memoirs, timelines, it all points to the same thing. For 2 days, the world was on a knife's edge.
It's actually frightening when you read it. The Middle East was, it was closer to a full-scale open war than it had been in years.
It was a high-stakes game of chicken. One miscalculation, one garbled message, and you could have had total war.
So our mission today is to really unpack that 48-hour period. We want to understand how Washington and Tehran navigated this absolute chaos with the clock ticking down.
How do you manage a crisis where one side is screaming for revenge and the other has already drawn its red line in the sand?
Okay, so let's back up just a little bit before the fallout, the decision itself. Because reading the background, this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing, was it?
That's a really crucial point. In this world, nothing this big is ever truly impulsive. The option to target Soleimani had been on a list presented to the president weeks before. But, and this is the key, it was labeled the extreme option.
The extreme option. Is that just military speak for the really bad idea?
It's more of a briefing tactic, really. You see it all the time. Advisors present, say, 3 options. Option A is the soft approach, maybe some sanctions.
Do nothing, basically.
Right. Option B is the moderate response, hit a weapons depot, something like that. And then you have option C, the extreme one, the one that's designed to make option B look really reasonable.
The Goldilocks principle. You throw in the crazy option so the middle one seems just right.
Precisely. No one really expected him to pick it. It was there as an anchor.
So what changed? What took it from being this, unthinkable option to launch the drone?
The calculus shifted. An American contractor was killed in a rocket attack. That was the first domino. But the visual that really sent a panic through Washington was the storming of the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad.
I remember those images. The fires, the smashed windows. It had echoes of 1979.
Or Benghazi. And that was the absolute fear in the administration. That feeling of an American symbol being overrun, it changed the entire conversation. It went from, should we respond, to how hard do we have to hit them to make this stop?
And their answer was to cut the head off the snake.
That was the thinking. But to get why this was such a seismic shock, you have to understand who Soleimani actually was. He was much more than just a general.
He was the commander of the Quds Force.
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean for someone who doesn't, follow Iranian military charts?
Think of it like a hybrid organization. Imagine you combine the CIO's covert ops, the Joint Special Operations Command, and a high-level diplomat all into one person's job description. That was his world.
So he was the guy connecting Tehran to the militias in Iraq, to Hezbollah in Lebanon, to Assad in Syria.
He was the architect of that whole network. He'd survived decades of shadow wars. He was seen as this untouchable figure, a ghost. He even traveled openly because he just didn't believe the U.S. would ever dare to strike him directly.
And then they did. So the Pentagon confirms the kill. What's the immediate feeling inside the U.S. military? I'm guessing it wasn't just celebration.
Oh, far from it. That's when the real, let's call it controlled panic sets in. The entire U.S. military presence in the region goes to high alert. They knew they had just kicked the hornet's nest.
What does high alert even look like in that situation? Are we talking about, troops grabbing their rifles?
We're talking much bigger. Strategic assets. Patriot missile batteries are being repositioned all over the region. Naval carrier groups are moving to monitor the Strait of Hormuz. The working assumption was not if Iran would respond, but when and how.
And across the border in Tehran, the mood must have been Explosive.
Absolute shock, followed by rage. You have to remember, in Iran, Soleimani was a national hero. He was more popular than their own president. Crowds just started pouring into the streets almost immediately.
And that's when the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, makes a statement. He uses a very specific phrase: harsh revenge.
Harsh revenge. And in geopolitics, when a figure like that says something so publicly, it becomes a promise he has to keep.
That's what's so interesting. By saying it out loud, he basically trapped himself, right?
Completely. It's the classic authoritarian dilemma. If Iran does nothing or something small, they look weak. They look afraid of America. They lose all credibility with their proxies.
But if they actually deliver a harsh revenge, something that kills a lot of Americans,
Yeah.
they risk a massive war.
A war they can't win. So they're walking this impossible tightrope. They need a response that's big enough for the TV cameras at home, but small enough that it doesn't trigger an all-out conflict.
An incredible needle to thread. So let's get into that first 24-hour period. The fog of war is setting in. What's happening on the ground?
Well, for the first day, the loudest thing is the silence. No missiles yet. But behind the scenes, intelligence chatter is just off the charts. The NSA is picking up signals detecting movement of Iranian missile launchers.
And what about for the average U.S. soldier at a base like Al-Assad in Iraq? What are they feeling?
It's the bunker experience, and they're not worried about the usual small-time mortar attacks. They're waiting for ballistic missiles.
And just for a second, explain the difference. Why is that so much scarier?
A mortar, a Katyusha rocket, those are imprecise. If you're in a concrete bunker, you're probably going to be okay. A ballistic missile is a whole different category of weapon. It can weigh thousands of pounds and comes down at hypersonic speeds.
It doesn't just damage a building, it creates a crater where the building used to be.
Exactly. And according to some of the source interviews, you have U.S. personnel in these hardened shelters writing goodbye letters on their phones. They know that if one of those things hits their bunker, the concrete might not be enough. They're just sitting in the dark, waiting.
That's terrifying. Meanwhile, back in Washington, what's the public message from the White House?
Publicly, it's maximum pressure. President Trump is on Twitter talking about hitting 52 Iranian targets, boasting about having the best military in the world. It's all about projecting strength to deter them.
But what's happening privately?
Privately, they're doing this very cold, very clinical calculation. The sources call it escalation absorption.
Yeah, escalation absorption. It sounds like a term from an insurance company, not a war room.
It is. It's risk management. The National Security Council was essentially gaming out how much damage they were willing to take without launching a massive counterstrike. And they drew a very, very bright red line.
American lives.
American lives. If Iranian retaliation destroys equipment, okay, we can absorb that. But if Americans die, a massive response is mandatory. We hit their oil fields, their command centers. But if no one dies, there's an off-ramp. There's room to de-escalate.
Okay, so this brings us to hour 36 or so. The whole world is holding its breath. And this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn.
This is the real aha moment in the deep dive. While everyone's watching the public threats, the U.S. government sends a secret message to Iran.
Through an intermediary, right. I think it was the Swiss.
Correct, the Swiss embassy in Tehran. And the message they passed along was, well, it was stunningly pragmatic. It wasn't, don't you dare.
It was something else entirely.
The subtext of the message was basically, we know you have to respond, but do not kill any Americans.
Hang on, let me just get this straight. The United States told Iran, go ahead and shoot missiles at our bases, just aim them away from our people.
Essentially, yes. It's a textbook example of something called controlled brinkmanship. Both sides needed a way out. Iran had to strike to save face. The U.S. wanted to avoid a full-scale war. So this message created a pre-agreed path.
So it's like a choreographed fight. With live ammunition.
Exactly. It lets Iran show its people, look, we hit the great Satan, while giving the U.S. administration the ability to say, no Americans were harmed, so we don't need to escalate.
That's incredible. It's a secret agreement to have a pretend battle with very real missiles.
And that's the risk. It's controlled, but the margin for error is basically zero. If one missile's guidance is faulty, or one soldier is in the wrong place at the wrong time, the deal is off.
So we're approaching hour 48. The message has been sent. Iran has to decide.
And they decide to take the offer. Missile crews in Iran get their orders. They start fueling the missiles, which, by the way, is a visible process. It's another signal to U.S. satellites, giving them a heads up.
They're not backing down, but they're playing by the secret rules.
They punch in the coordinates for U.S. bases in Iraq. The retaliation is happening.
And then it happens. Almost exactly 48 hours after Soleimani was killed.
Radar screens light up. 16 ballistic missiles leave Iranian soil.
16. That is not a warning shot. That's a major strike.
It's a heavy barrage, and for the next several minutes, the flight time of those missiles, no one in Washington knows for sure what the outcome will be.
That must be the most agonizing. Wait, you know they're in the air, you know where they're heading, but you don't know if Iran held up its end of the bargain.
Did they aim for empty hangars or did they aim for the barracks? The entire fate of the region is literally in the air for those few minutes. If those missiles kill 100 soldiers, the world we live in today is completely different.
The impacts come, the dust starts to settle, and the initial reports come in.
The missiles do massive damage. They destroy aircraft, they flatten buildings, they turn concrete blast walls into powder. But the casualty count is 0.
It's amazing. I mean, the physics of those explosions. Someone should have died.
Absolutely. The blast waves were enormous. But because of the early warnings, the bunkers, and yes, probably some very careful targeting by Iran, everyone survived the initial impacts.
Now, we should be clear. There were serious injuries, traumatic brain injuries from the concussions. This was not a harmless event.
No, not at all. Over 100 service members were later diagnosed with TBIs. But in that critical, binary moment of war and peace, the number that mattered was 0 deaths.
So, when we zoom out, what's the big takeaway from these 48 hours?
We're looking at a rare and terrifying success. That back-channel communication, the escalation absorption, the secret message, it worked.
It just barely worked.
Barely is the key word. But it did. Both countries got to walk away and claim a victory of sorts. Iran got its televised harsh revenge, and the U.S. avoided a new war in the Middle East.
It's just wild to think that peace, in that moment, rested on such a bizarre, high-stakes gamble.
And it leaves you with a really provocative thought, doesn't it? We always think of war in terms of hardware, drones, missiles, jets. But in this 48-hour window, the most powerful weapon wasn't a Hellfire missile or a ballistic missile.
It was a message.
It was the calculated gamble of controlled brinkmanship. And it makes you wonder, how often is global peace really just held together by a quiet back-channel message that says, go ahead and shoot, just please don't hit us?
Probably more often than we'd be comfortable knowing. We survived the 48 hours, but the story wasn't over.
Not at all. Because even though nobody died in the initial blast, the impact of those missiles was just beginning to be felt.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to tackle in our next deep dive. We're calling it The Missile Strike That Didn't Kill. We'll explore the TBI crisis and the long-term political fallout.
It's a critical piece of the story. You won't want to miss it.
Thank you for listening to this deep dive. Stay curious.
See you next time.